Inside a racially tense courtroom, a blind black girl named Ava is humiliated and accused of faking her disability. The white prosecutor mocks her openly, while the judge remains cold and silent. But Ava surprises everyone with a powerful comeback, just before her guide dog walks in, revealing something that no one expected. "You people don't belong in places like this." The courtroom fell silent. Every creak of the old wooden benches, every cough, every breath felt too loud. The words hung in the air like smoke, toxic, suffocating. Ava stood still, her white cane gripped tightly in her right hand, knuckles pale from pressure. Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak. The words weren't unfamiliar. She had heard them before, whispered, spat, printed in subtle policies, but never had they stung this deeply. The courtroom was a tall, windowless room lit by fluorescent lights that flickered like they were unsure of their job. Rows of pale wooden benches were filled with murmuring spectators. Cameras weren't allowed, but that hadn't stopped the gossip from leaking. Everyone came to see the blind black girl who faked it. That's what the headlines called her. The prosecutor, a tall white man with an expensive haircut and a voice soaked in contempt, paced slowly, eyes fixed on Ava like she was prey. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, gesturing dramatically, "this young woman has manipulated the system, used her so-called disability and status to gain sympathy, to cheat, to lie blind. Please, look how confidently she walked in here. It's all a show." Ava's attorney whispered something, but she couldn't hear him over the ringing in her ears. The whole courtroom seemed to blur, despite the fact that she couldn't see it to begin with. "She's an actress," the prosecutor continued, "a master manipulator." A few heads in the crowd nodded, some shook, but most just stared. Like watching a train wreck, they couldn't look away from Dot. At the judge's bench sat a woman in her 50s, white, stone-faced, her lips pursed like she'd already made her decision. Her silence was louder than the prosecutor's voice. She hadn't smiled once since Ava entered, and sitting to the side, Ava could sense them, were the so-called witnesses. People from the neighborhood who'd always treated her with suspicion. They now came dressed in truth's costume, ready to testify against her. It didn't matter that there was no real proof. They had their opinions, and that, somehow, had become enough. She walked into a restricted lab area, the prosecutor said. No escort, no guide, no permission. And now, she wants us to believe she had no idea where she was going. He paused for dramatic effect. "Your Honor, if this girl is blind, then I'm the Queen of England." The crowd chuckled. Ava's heart shattered. A hot tear slipped down her cheek. She wanted to scream. She wanted to speak, but she knew no one here was listening. Then, he said it. "You people don't belong in places like this." It wasn't in the record. It wasn't meant for the microphones, but it was loud enough for her ears. Ava's shoulders straightened. She inhaled deeply. Everyone saw the moment shift. She stood up slowly, tapping her cane once against the tile floor. The sound echoed. Her head tilted upward, though she couldn't see their faces. She could feel every eye in the room snap toward her. "I may not see your face, sir," she said calmly, "but I can see the fear in your voice." Silence. The judge blinked. The prosecutor took a step back. "You're not afraid of me lying," Ava continued. "You're afraid of me telling the truth, for the first time all day." The room listened, because if a blind black girl could walk into your precious space, do what you didn't expect, then maybe it's not me who doesn't belong. Maybe it's the system that doesn't. There was a stillness, then a loud bark. Gasps rippled through the room. The courtroom doors creaked open, in padded steps. A golden Labrador entered, Ava's guide dog, Zion. But this time, something was different. Around his neck was a harness, and attached to it, a tiny, blinking camera. The judge leaned forward. "What is that?" Ava tilted her head slightly, smiling faintly for the first time. "That's the truth, Your Honor. The camera, the footage." The moment everything began to change. A court officer hesitated at the door, unsure what to do. "Bring the dog forward," the judge finally said. The officer obeyed. Zion padded toward Ava, stopping faithfully at her side. The blinking camera mounted on his harness caught everyone's attention. A technician approached with a small cable, kneeling down to connect the camera to a monitor beside the bench. The courtroom was tense, the kind of silence that makes you hold your breath without realizing it. "Are you certain this is relevant evidence?" the prosecutor barked, suddenly nervous. Ava didn't turn toward him. "You were certain I was lying?" Let's find out. The technician gave a nod. The judge said flatly, "Proceed." And then, the footage began. Grainy at first, the timestamp in the corner marked a date 3 weeks ago. The camera followed Ava's steps as she walked through the university science building. Her cane tapped in rhythm with Zion's steady pace. She moved slowly but surely, each movement deliberate. The footage captured her asking a receptionist for directions. Her voice was polite, calm. "Excuse me," Video Ava said. "Can you point me to Dr. Patel's lab?" The receptionist didn't answer. The camera caught her ignoring Ava completely, turning her head and pretending not to hear. A few murmurs rippled through the room. The video continued. Ava walked down the hallway with Zion leading the way. The door to the lab had a sign that read, "Authorized personnel only." But just as she paused in front of it, a white male student, tall hoodie, AirPods in, opened it without hesitation and held it open for her without looking up. "She must be the new assistant," he mumbled, and walked away. Gasps again. The judge's expression tightened on in the video. Ava hesitated. "I'm not sure I should," she began. But the door was already swinging closed. Zion stepped inside. Ava followed. That's when everything changed. Inside the lab, she paused. The room was filled with humming equipment, beeping monitors, and a quiet voice in the distance. A professor emerged from a side door. "You're early," he said, smiling. It was Dr. Patel, the real Dr. Patel. "I didn't know you'd be coming today," he added. "You're Ava, right?" The real-time courtroom prosecutor shifted in his seat, his face paling. The video continued. Dr. Patel explaining something about her internship starting the next week. Ava apologizing for showing up on the wrong day. Him assuring her it was fine, offering her water, guiding her toward the elevator when she said she was tired. It was calm, respectful, human, exactly the opposite of what the courtroom had been told. The final moment of the video, Ava turning toward Zion and whispering, "You did great." Then the camera cut off. Back in the courtroom, all eyes were on the judge, or rather, they were flickering between her, the prosecutor, and Ava. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "Well, this doesn't prove she's blind. She could have staged." The judge raised a hand. Silence. Her voice was ice. She turned toward Ava. "Miss Jordan, how long have you been legally blind?" Ava lifted her chin. "Since I was 12, and this dog, my service animal, trained for 7 years." The judge nodded slowly, then turned to the technician. "Is this camera legally admissible? Was the footage altered?" "No, Your Honor. It was recorded directly from the device. Time-stamped, secure, no signs of tampering." The courtroom was still. Even the murmuring crowd fell into stunned silence, but not everyone was quiet. From the third row, a woman in a pale pink cardigan, the receptionist from the video, buried her face in her hands. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began again, but the judge's gaze cut through him like glass. "Do you realize what you've done?" she asked. He flinched. "You attempted to dismantle this young woman's life. You humiliated her in open court. Built your case on the assumption that no one would believe her, that her truth wasn't enough." He opened his mouth. "Sit down," she snapped. He obeyed. Zion let out a small huff, as if satisfied. Ava stood quietly, her cane resting against her leg. "I came here prepared to lose," she said softly, "because I've seen how the world works when you look like me. But I also knew I didn't come alone." She knelt briefly to stroke Zion's head. "I brought the truth with me." The judge folded her hands. "We'll take a recess. When we return, I expect formal apologies and re-evaluation of all charges." With that, she stood. Court was adjourned. But the real trial of perception, of reputation, of justice, had just begun. The wooden doors of the courtroom creaked open, and a wave of hushed voices poured into the corridor like smoke escaping a fire. Ava stepped out slowly, her cane tapping against the polished marble floor. Zion remained close, his body pressed protectively to her side. Even without sight, Ava could feel the weight of their stares. They weren't speaking to her, but they were certainly speaking about her. "She's the one from the video. She really is blind. I thought this was a fraud case." "Did you see the way the prosecutor's face dropped?" The whispers felt louder than gunfire. Ava held her head high, but inside, her heart was still racing. She hadn't expected the footage to change everything so quickly. She had hoped for doubt, not a full-blown shift in the room's energy. Her attorney, a soft-spoken woman named Dana Chen, leaned in as they reached the hallway bench. You were incredible in there, Dana said gently, but don't relax yet. This case has always been about more than evidence. It's about perception. Ava nodded slightly. I know. Dana paused, choosing her next words carefully. The footage was a turning point, no doubt. But if the public thinks you staged it even slightly, the damage to your reputation might still stick. This court may not convict you, but the world outside ... They don't need proof. Ava exhaled slowly. They just need doubt. Yes. Footsteps approached, hesitant but firm. Ava turned slightly as a woman spoke. Miss Jordan. The voice was nervous, tinged with something like guilt. Yes, Ava replied. I'm Julia. I work the front desk at the University Science Building. I think you may remember me. Ava's hand tensed slightly on her cane. Julia continued. I didn't mean to ignore you that day. Honestly, I was having a rough morning. I didn't know you were blind. You didn't look at me, Ava said quietly. Julia's silence answered for her. I saw the footage, and I realized, Julia said, her voice cracking. I'm part of the reason people didn't believe you. I didn't speak up. I didn't even treat you like a person. I just assumed. Ava didn't speak for a moment. Then she asked gently, why are you telling me this? Julia's answer was immediate. Because I want to testify. Dana raised an eyebrow. Are you aware that doing so could put you at odds with your employer? With the prosecution? I don't care, Julia whispered. What happened was wrong. I was wrong. Zion let out a soft breath. Ava knelt again, pressing her palm to his head, grounding herself. Okay, Ava said finally. If you're serious, tell the truth. Not for me, for yourself. Julia nodded, voice shaky. Thank you. She turned and walked away, the sound of her heels fading into the hallway noise. Dana leaned in again. That was big. Ava nodded. It's funny, Ava murmured. The people who hurt me never thought twice, and the people who helped me didn't know they were doing it. Dana smiled faintly. That's how real change starts. Quietly, uncomfortably. Ava listened to the hum of the hallway. Somewhere down the corridor, the prosecutor was probably pacing, planning, trying to regroup. Zion let out a tiny whimper. I know, boy, Ava said. We're not done yet. Just then, another set of footsteps approached. These more confident. Ava Jordan. A man's voice, steady, official. Yes, I'm from the university's administration. I've been asked to speak with you. Privately. Dennis stepped between them. She's not speaking to anyone without counsel. The man raised his hands. Of course. But you should know, some of the professors, and even members of the board, they've been watching this trial closely, and they're not happy with how you've been treated. Ava tilted her head. Is that an apology? Not quite, but it might be. A beginning. He handed Dana a sealed envelope. We'll be in touch. As he walked away, Dana opened the envelope. Inside was a formal letter with the university's crest at the top, and 3 words that made Ava freeze. Proposal for reinstatement. Court resumed with the same cold intensity as before, but this time, something had shifted. The judge's gavel struck once. We are back in session. Ava sat upright, hands resting firmly in her lap. Zion was lying at her feet, tail still, ears perked. Dana whispered softly beside her, stay calm, let them show their cards. The prosecutor, Mr. Lindell, stood with obvious discomfort. Gone was his swagger, his smirking confidence. What remained was a strained attempt to regain control. Your Honor, he began, clearing his throat. I would like to formally retract earlier statements, suggesting Miss Jordan fabricated her disability. The judge narrowed her eyes. Retract? Yes, Your Honor. After reviewing the newly submitted evidence, I acknowledge that certain assumptions were made in error. Dana stood. Your Honor, with respect, that's not an apology, that's an escape. The judge nodded. Agreed. Mr. Lindell, you were instructed to deliver a formal apology, not a sanitized revision. Mr. Lindell's lips tightened. Very well. He turned toward Ava without meeting her eyes. Miss Jordan, I apologize for any statements made that questioned your condition or character. My intent was never personal. Ava remained silent. It was performative, robotic, like he was reading from a script written by lawyers in fear. She didn't want an apology. She wanted them to mean it. The judge exhaled sharply. Let the record show that the prosecution has issued a ... statement. Her emphasis on the word was unmistakable. Then she turned to the clerk. Please call the next witness. The door at the back of the courtroom opened. Julia walked in. shoulders stiff, hands clasped nervously. She took the stand. Dana approached, keeping her voice steady but clear. "State your name and occupation for the court, please." "Julia Reynolds. I'm a receptionist at the Westbrook Science Building, University campus." "Julia, were you working on the day Miss Ava Jordan entered that building?" "Yes." "Did she speak to you?" Julia swallowed hard. "She tried to." "Did you respond?" "No." "Why not?" "I assumed she wasn't supposed to be there. I thought she was trying to sneak in." A few gasps again from the audience. Ava remained still, breathing slowly. "Did Miss Jordan identify herself?" "She asked for directions, politely. I ignored her." "And how did that make you feel, watching the footage back?" Julia blinked rapidly. "Awful," I realized. I didn't just ignore her because I was busy. I ignored her because I assumed she didn't belong, because she was blind. Julia hesitated. Because she was blind, and because she was black. The courtroom fell silent again. Even the judge's expression changed, no longer just stern, but weary. Dana nodded. "Thank you for your honesty, Ms. Reynolds." Mr. Lindell approached next. He tried to sound collected, but his voice cracked. "Ms. Reynolds, are you testifying under any pressure from the defense?" "No." "Are you being compensated?" "No." "So why now?" Julia looked toward Ava. "Because I've been complicit in a system that treats people like her as suspects, by default. And because I finally realized, silence is a choice too." A long beat, no further questions. She stepped down and walked directly toward Ava. Her footsteps slowed as she neared, then stopped. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice trembling. Ava didn't move for a long second. Then, softly, "I forgive you, but don't stop here." Julia nodded tearfully, then slipped away. The judge called a short break before closing remarks. As the crowd emptied again, Dana leaned toward Ava. "That was powerful. Her words carry weight." Ava shook her head. "They shouldn't have had to." "What do you mean?" "I shouldn't need white validation to be believed." Dana didn't reply, because Ava was right. She stood slowly, Zion rising beside her, and, as they walked quietly toward the side door, she whispered something only her dog could hear. "They heard her, but I need them to hear me next." "I'd like to testify," Ava said. The courtroom froze. Dana turned to her, stunned. "Are you sure?" Ava nodded slowly. "They've heard everyone else's version of who I am. Now they're going to hear mine." The judge leaned forward. "Miss Jordan, this is your choice. You are not obligated." "I understand, Your Honor, but I want to." There was a pause, a beat that felt sacred. Then the judge nodded once. "Proceed." A bailiff led Ava gently to the witness stand. Her white cane tapped with each step. Zion sat obediently below her feet as she settled into the seat and folded her hands in her lap. Dana approached with no script, no notes. "Miss Jordan," she said softly, "can you tell the court what it's like to be you?" The question hung in the air like perfume, invisible but impossible to ignore. Ava turned slightly toward where she knew the judge sat, then where she sensed the jury. "Being me," she began, "means walking into rooms and being counted out before I even speak. It means being underestimated twice." "Twice?" Dana asked. "Once for being blind, again for being black." The audience quieted further. "I learned to read with my fingers before. Most kids even learned to spell. I memorized the routes to school, to home, to the grocery store. I trained with Zion for 2 years. And still, people assume I'm lost." She inhaled slowly. "And then there's how they speak to me. Loud, slow, like I'm stupid or broken." Her voice didn't tremble. It rang, clear and steady. "I didn't ask to be born blind, but I was never ashamed of it. I didn't ask to be born black, but I've never wanted to be anything else. It's the world that made me feel like those things were flaws." Dana stepped back, letting her words linger. "And the day I walked into that lab building, I was scared. Not because I couldn't see, but because I knew people would think I didn't belong." She tilted her head slightly upward. "And I was right." Zion let out a small, low exhale. Ava reached down instinctively to touch his head, as if to steady both of them. "Being disabled in this world means proving you're telling the truth, just to get basic respect. Being black in this system means that even truth isn't always enough." She paused. "But I brought mine anyway." A long silence followed. No one dared to move. Then Dana stepped forward again. "Why didn't you walk away when this started?" Ava gave the smallest smile. Because I've walked away from too many things. I've let people talk over me, step past me, decide for me. This time, I decided I was going to stay. She turned her face toward the judge. And if I leave here today still doubted, at least it won't be because I stayed silent. Dana nodded slowly. No further questions, Your Honor. There was a long pause before the prosecutor stood. He walked slowly, carefully, toward the stand, as if afraid of cracking the moment. Miss Jordan, he began, more softly than usual, you say people judge you for being blind and black. Do you believe that's what happened here? Ava didn't hesitate. Yes. You don't think people were just doing their jobs? I think racism and ableism don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear neckties. Sometimes they speak softly, but they're still there. The courtroom felt like it had stopped breathing. The prosecutor opened his mouth to say something, then closed it again. No further questions, he mumbled, retreating. The judge spoke gently. Miss Jordan, you may step down. Ava stood, cane in hand, Zion rising at her heel. She walked back to the defense table, head high, spine straight, and the room followed her like a spotlight. Dana whispered as she sat down, you just changed everything. Ava shook her head. Not yet, but I lit the match. The judge called the court back to order, but this time she wasn't speaking with cold formality. Her voice carried weight, not just of the law, but of something deeper. Before we proceed, 2 closing statements, she began. I have a few questions for both the prosecution and the defense. Dana and Mr. Lindell stood at attention. The judge turned first to Mr. Lindell. Her eyes locked. Counselor, at what point in your investigation did you verify Miss Jordan's disability through medical records? Lindell hesitated. We reviewed public data, Your Honor. Public data? Yes, and we based our concern on security footage suggesting unusual mobility. The judge raised an eyebrow. Security footage, but not her medical file. Well, it was presumed. The judge repeated flatly. A legal case built on presumption. He went silent. Then she turned to Dana. Defense counsel, do you believe this case would have gone to trial if Miss Jordan were not a woman of color? Dana's reply was immediate. No, Your Honor, not a chance. That answer didn't surprise Ava, but the pause afterward did. The judge leaned back slowly in her chair, as if weighing the room itself. Then she addressed the court. I've presided over hundreds of cases, some rooted in facts, some in feeling, but this case has exposed something uglier than one accusation. It's exposed the quiet machinery of assumption, the speed at which society rushes to believe the worst about someone who doesn't look or sound the way they expect. The gallery was utterly silent now. Miss Jordan was judged, not by law, but by fear. Her race, her disability, her audacity to walk into a building some people didn't believe she belonged in. Ava sat perfectly still, her hands clenched in her lap. The judge wasn't speaking to her. She was speaking to everyone, and then a hand raised in the jury box. The courtroom stirred. The judge looked up, startled. Yes, a middle-aged black man with salt and pepper hair stood from his seat. Your Honor, I understand we haven't reached deliberation yet, but I request permission to address the court as a citizen, not a juror. The courtroom buzzed. The judge gave a cautious nod. Proceed briefly. He turned to face the room. I've been sitting here listening, watching. I've seen this young woman stripped of her dignity, then forced to prove its worth. He gestured toward Ava. Do you know how hard it is to walk into a place every day, knowing they don't want you? I do, I've lived it. But Ava didn't walk in angry. She walked in determined. And what did the system do? It tried to break her. He looked around, and still she stayed. She stood. She spoke. Blind, yes, but she saw more than any of us. A beat of silence. Then he sat down. Even Zion seemed stiller than usual. The judge cleared her throat. Thank you. The court appreciates your words. Mr. Lindell looked like he wanted to object, but couldn't find a reason that wouldn't make him look worse. Dana whispered. That man just tipped the room. Ava nodded slowly, and yet she didn't smile, because she knew better. This wasn't victory yet. The courtroom had changed, yes, but the system rarely changed in one trial. Still, something had cracked, a hairline fracture in the armor of assumptions. She could feel it for once. Ava didn't feel like she was on trial anymore. She felt like the system was, and that shift, however small, was enough to keep going. The judge's gavel came down with a heavy finality. This court is in recess. Jury will now deliberate. The sound of wooden benches creaking filled the courtroom as 12 citizens filed into the side room. Their faces were unreadable. Some glanced briefly at Ava. Most didn't, but Ava didn't need their looks to know what they were thinking. Outside the courtroom, the hallway buzzed again, but this time, the tension was different. It wasn't hostility. It was anticipation. Dana guided Ava gently to a quieter corner near a wide window, where the sunlight poured in. Zion curled up at her feet. "You were brilliant in there," Dana said softly. Ava gave a quiet smile. "I wasn't trying to be brilliant. I just didn't want to leave anything unsaid." "You didn't." Ava leaned against the cold marble wall. "It's strange," she said. "I walked into that courtroom thinking I had to prove I was innocent, but I realized I wasn't the one on trial. It was their perception." Dana nodded slowly. "And you cracked it." A long silence settled between them. Then, Ava asked, "Do you think they'll still find a way to make me the villain?" Dana paused. "I think the system always tries, but today, it might fail." Inside the jury room, it had already begun. "We all saw the footage," said juror number 6, a white woman in her 30s. "It's clear she didn't break into that building. She was invited. She didn't fake her blindness either," said juror number 9. "You saw her, Kane, the dog, the way she walked. You don't fake that for years." "But it's not just about that," said juror number 2, a gray-haired man in a plaid tie, arms crossed tight. "She's suing the university now. She's trying to make a name. That's what this is." Juror number 5 leaned forward. She was defending herself. "They brought her to trial, not the other way around. It still feels theatrical." Juror number 2 insisted. "Like a performance." Juror number 11, the older black man who had spoken in open court earlier, folded his hands. "Maybe that's because you're used to people like her staying quiet." The room fell silent. "We're not here to vote on how she makes you feel," he continued. "We're here to vote on what she did, and what she didn't do." Juror number 3 pulled out a printed sheet. "University policy says only authorized individuals are allowed in the lab. The professor invited her. That's authorization." Another juror nodded. "And the dog's footage, that seals it." "Still," juror number 2 shook his head. "There's just something about her that doesn't sit right with me," he muttered. Juror number 11 looked him dead in the eye. "Is it her blindness that bothers you, or the fact that she didn't act how you expected a blind black girl to act?" No answer. The room grew colder. Back in the hallway, Ava sat in silence, her hand resting on Zion's back. The dog's breathing was slow, steady, calming. "I've spent so much of my life being palatable," Ava said quietly. "Careful, not to offend, not to sound angry, not to push too hard. But I realized something this week." Dana glanced toward her. "What's that?" "They'll hate you anyway, so you might as well be real." Dana smiled. "That's a hard-earned truth." Suddenly, the courtroom doors opened again. A bailiff stepped out. "They've reached a verdict." Ava's heart skipped a beat. Zion lifted his head. "Already?" Dana stood and offered her hand. Ava took it. "Ready?" Dana asked. "No," Ava whispered. "But I'm going anyway." The crowd filtered back in. Everyone was holding their breath again. But this time, for a different reason. The judge returned to the bench. "Will the foreperson please rise?" A woman in the second seat stood. "Have you reached a unanimous verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." Ava's hands tightened around her cane. The foreperson held the slip of paper, her fingers trembling slightly. "In the matter of Ava Jordan," she began, but Ava didn't hear the rest. Not yet. She just focused on Zion's warmth against her leg, the weight of the silence around her, and the fact that whatever came next, she had finally spoken. "In the matter of Ava Jordan," the foreperson said, voice steady now, "we find the defendant not guilty on all counts." A collective gasp rolled through the courtroom like thunder across a field. Ava felt the world tilt, not in shock, but in release. For the first time in weeks, she exhaled fully. Zion pressed against her leg gently, sensing her emotion before anyone else did. The judge nodded. "The court thanks the jury for its service. Miss Jordan, you are free to go. This trial is adjourned." The gavel dropped, but the noise didn't end. People murmured. Some clapped softly. Others remained frozen, uncomfortable with the truth that justice had, for once, leaned in a direction they hadn't expected. "Mr. Lindell," the prosecutor began gathering his papers. His hands were shaking. He glanced up once, locking eyes. with Ava across the courtroom. There was something in his face, not guilt, just discomfort, like he wasn't sure if he should apologize or disappear. He chose the latter. Dana turned to Ava, beaming. "You did it." Ava shook her head. "We did it, but also, we shouldn't have had to." Dana's smile faded slightly. "No, we shouldn't have." The press waited outside. The corridor buzzed with reporters, students, administrators, everyone who had whispered her name behind closed doors. Now they waited to shout it. But Ava wasn't thinking about the cameras, she was thinking about the girl she used to be. The one who kept her cane tucked away in her locker because it made people stare. The one who memorized the footsteps of hallways so she wouldn't look lost. The one who learned to smile politely while being doubted constantly. That girl had walked into this trial carrying all her fears, and somehow, she had walked out standing, tall. As she stepped out of the courtroom, a reporter thrust a mic toward her. "Miss Jordan, do you feel vindicated?" Ava paused, then spoke calmly. "I feel seen." Flashbulbs went off. More questions followed. "How did you stay so calm? Do you plan to sue the university? What message do you have for other people with disabilities?" She didn't answer them all. She just stood there for a moment, taking it in, letting the world see her not as a headline or a spectacle, but as herself. And then, from the back of the crowd, a familiar voice called out, "Ava." She turned slightly. It was Dr. Patel. He rushed forward, his eyes soft, face flushed with shame. "Ava, I'm so sorry. I should have spoken up sooner. I should have." She held up a hand. "It's okay," she said. "No, it's not," he replied, "but I want to make it right. The board, they've reinstated your internship, if you'll still have it." She paused, then smiled. "I'll think about it." Behind her, Dana chuckled softly. "You just left a tenured professor, sweating." "I know," Ava said. "Felt good." From the steps of the courthouse, Julia stood watching, hands clasped, eyes full. She didn't speak, just nodded slowly. Ava nodded back, a silent promise. "You did your part. I did mine." Zion led her forward, down the courthouse steps, and into the sun. For the first time in weeks, her footsteps weren't being watched. They were being followed in awe, in curiosity, in change. At the bottom of the stairs, Dana asked, "So what's next?" Ava turned her face toward the breeze. "I go back, to school, to living, to not apologizing for who I am." Dana nodded. "And what about the people who still think you're lying?" Ava smiled. "I let them sit with that discomfort." A pause. "Because I've sat with mine long enough." The university campus looked the same. The buildings hadn't changed. The bricks were still faded red. The trees still leaned just a little too far over the walkways, and the same rust-colored bench creaked near the science building doors. But the air felt different as Ava walked across the courtyard, Zion leading with soft, confident steps. The silence around her was thicker than ever, not heavy with hostility, but with awareness. People didn't whisper this time. They didn't know what to say at all. A few students nodded respectfully as she passed. Some lowered their eyes. Others moved quickly out of the way, pretending to check their phones. Ava smiled to herself. Not one of them had apologized, but none of them had laughed either. That, in itself, was progress. Inside the building, she walked, past the same receptionist desk where Julia had once ignored her completely. But today, Julia stood up the moment she heard Ava's cane tap the floor. "Miss Jordan," she said, her voice warm, but tentative. Ava paused. Julia stepped forward. "You probably don't want to hear this again, but I'm truly sorry for everything. I've been reading more, learning more, not just about disability, but about bias, about how easy it is to be part of the problem when you don't even realize you're in it." Ava tilted her head. "Then I'm glad I made you uncomfortable." Julia blinked, then smiled. "You did, and I needed it." Ava gave a small nod. "Thank you. Keep going." She continued down the hall. The lab smelled the same. That cold, metallic temps of electronics and overused air conditioning. But the moment she entered, someone called her name. "Ava." It was a student, Kyle, the one who had held the lab door open for her weeks ago without a second glance. He looked like he hadn't slept in a few days. "I saw the trial footage," he said. "Didn't know I was in it until afterward." She tilted her head. "You called me an assistant." He nodded. "Because you were supposed to be there, and I didn't think twice." "That's exactly the point," she said. He looked embarrassed. "I know, I guess. I just wanted to say, thanks for speaking up. even when none of us did. Ava raised an eyebrow. You want to thank me for doing your job? He winced. Yeah, fair. Good. Let that sit with you. She turned and walked deeper into the lab. Inside, Dr. Patel was standing by a long table. Papers stacked neatly, 2 mugs of tea steaming beside a tablet. I wasn't sure you'd come back, he said softly. I wasn't sure either, Ava replied. I meant what I said. I'd be honored to have you in the program. She paused, then smiled faintly. Then let's try again. But this time, you treat me like a student, not a symbol. Deal, he said. They shook hands, brief, firm, human. Afterward, as she walked out of the building, Dana was waiting for her on the bench outside. You've got mail, she said, holding out a thick envelope. Ava opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, handwritten, in tight cursive. No name, no return address. I saw your trial. I used to work in the admissions office. I once screened out your application because I thought you'd have a hard time here. I told myself I was being kind, but I was being a coward. Watching you in that courtroom made me face that. I've since resigned. You deserve better gatekeepers. Ava, read it twice. Then she folded it. Anonymous. Dana asked. Ava nodded. Cowardly, but honest. That's new. They sat in silence for a few moments. Then Dana asked, do you ever wish you could have stayed invisible? Ava thought about that. She thought about the peace of moving through the world unseen, of never having to fight, of never being someone's lesson. Then she shook her head. No, she said. Visibility isn't the burden. Silence is. Dana smiled. So what now? I show up, every day, as myself. She stood Zion at her side, her cane tapping forward. I've spent enough time being the one who waits for the world to catch up. Now, she was done waiting. The university auditorium was packed. Students filled every row. Faculty lined the back wall. Even security guards lingered at the exits, not because they were needed, but because they didn't want to miss what was coming. A simple black banner hung above the stage, reframing access, disability, race, and dignity in higher education, and in the center of it all, Ava Jordan. She stood at the podium, hands gently resting on its edge. Zion sat at her feet, wearing his formal vest, motionless except for the slight tilt of his ears. The microphone buzzed softly, then Ava spoke. I never wanted to be a symbol, she began, and I still don't. A hush fell over the crowd. He just wanted to learn, to work, to walk into a building without being stopped, to speak without proving first that I was telling the truth. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. But somewhere along the way, that became too much. To ask, the audience was silent, eyes wide, phones down. I didn't speak because I wanted attention. I spoke because silence was killing me. Every time I said nothing, I gave permission for it to happen again. And I realized no one was coming to save me. Her voice didn't shake. It rang, not loud, but grounded, powerful in its calm. They thought I couldn't see them, she said, but I saw everything. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw the glances exchanged. When I entered a room, the polite voices that got sharper when I spoke up, the students who pretended I didn't exist, the faculty who assumed I was confused, the way my truth had to be dissected, replayed, investigated, just to be believed. She let that hang in the air. Blind isn't broken. Black isn't suspicious. And being both should never have been a trial. A woman in the third row wiped her eyes. Ava's hand found the mic again. They made me prove I was blind. Then they made me prove I wasn't a liar. Then they made me prove I wasn't angry. But they never asked themselves why I needed to prove anything in the first place. Behind her, the dean shifted uncomfortably in his seat. And here's the truth no one wants to say out loud, she continued. They weren't afraid I was lying. They were afraid I was right. A ripple of emotion surged through the room. And even after all that, I didn't walk away. She looked out, her blind gaze somehow more focused than any eye in the room. I stayed, not because I was strong, but because I was tired of disappearing. A pause. I will not shrink to fit this system. The system will expand to include me. Soft gasps, nods, even a few quiet claps. Ava stepped back, letting her cane tap gently once against the podium. I don't need you to agree with me. I don't even need you to like me. I just need you to know I'm not going anywhere. Zion stood. And together, they walked down the stage steps, slow, graceful, unstoppable. The auditorium remained quiet for a full 5 seconds. Then, like thunder cracking open a sky, the applause began. It wasn't polite, it was seismic. A standing ovation that shook the room. Students who had once whispered now shouted her name. Faculty who once questioned her presence now looked ashamed. Even the dean stood, clapping stiffly, trying to catch up. But Ava didn't look back. She didn't need their approval. She had her truth. Outside, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, Dana waited by the walkway. "How'd it go?" she asked. Smiling already. Ava shrugged. "I think they heard me." Zion huffed, as if agreeing. Dana handed her a small envelope. "Another one came in today," she said. Ava opened it. "No name, just a note. Because of you, I asked my boss to install a ramp for our intern. Because of you, I apologized to my brother for mocking his stutter. Because of you, I looked at myself and didn't like what I saw. Thank you for making me uncomfortable." Ava folded the note slowly, then slipped it into her pocket. "Ready to go?" Dana asked. Ava turned her face to the wind. "Always." And as she walked away, Kane tapping rhythmically, Zion beside her like a shadow stitched. From Faith, something remarkable happened. People moved, not away from her this time,